there's been a trend in Hollywood now that been costing studios a lot of money, and as a result, it's actually been churning out more and more garbage. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they're spending too much money on all their movies. Now, Blue Beetle is the latest result of this because they spent so much money on this movie thinking like it's attached to DC, so it'll succeed, right? Well, that's not always the case. I mean, even if it's attached to another franchise, it's still something unproven in and of itself. So it needs to be able to prove itself to the audience in order for people to turn out. But instead, they kind of have an arrogance about them where they think we'll just give it money and then people will just show up to it. And that's not how it works. And we're seeing that so often this last year. I mean, the term blockbuster has actually been coined just to describe what's been going on. And the solution is really they're just paying too much for all these movies. Now, something like Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny here seems like it's a better bet because, well, I mean, this is an Indiana Jones movie. It's a long-standing franchise. People love the character, but you got to keep in mind they spent so much money on this movie. I mean, this needed to make a minimum of $800 million in order to be considered a success. I mean, that's I think like around the break-even point for it was $800 million. Whereas Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, that made around $750 million back in the early 2000s, which is not a good sign for it, all things considered, because this movie is also following Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which wasn't well received because frankly, Harrison Ford is just too old to play the character anymore. Now, there's other problems with it as well. But the fact that they thought like, well, this last movie didn't go over too well, but it made a lot of money. So let's make another one that doesn't have that hype going into it and make it where it needs to make that much at a minimum in order to break even. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. But for some reason, they thought the name alone would actually work. And we're seeing this as a trend so badly that it's actually killing the mid-budget movie, which is actually a big problem right now, because a lot of those mid-budget ones are kind of the bread and butter of studios, or at least they used to be. I mean, they used to not bring in the huge dollars, but it was a steady, good revenue stream for them. I mean, just kind of like the small, steady, safe returns. But instead, now every movie has to be swinging for the fences. Like the studio needs to go for a home run with every picture, and if it doesn't get it, then they're just going to lose, which is terrible, not only from a business standpoint, but I mean, it just hurts the movie going public as well, because now every movie has to have 1,000 people involved with it from the creative standpoint. I mean, they have to test screen it, like focus group it out to oblivion to make sure it tries to appeal to everyone. And as a result, the best you can get is something that's like okay, but it's never going to be anything that's fantastic. And where you do find those movies that are just fantastic are usually in like more of the lower budget to mid budget ones, where the people in charge of the producing the movie actually have more creative control and you don't have a bunch of executives. And now that's where I get into this latest news about Gran Turismo. Now, I'm not going to say this is a low budget movie by any stretch of the imagination. The budget of it was around $60 million. But if you actually see what it did at the box office over its opening weekend, bringing in $53.8 million globally. So it pretty much matched its budget. And yeah, it still has a little ways to go in order to become profitable. But this is definitely a movie that's going to be profitable. And while you look at the Rotten Tomatoes scores of it, 98% is actually pretty good with audiences, even if it's not necessarily the best with critics. I mean, the critics are kind of a more of a wide variety of the audience, whereas you have the audience itself. Yeah, it might not have the huge numbers as other movies, like look at Blue Beetle. This brought in more money, but this is going to be a failure because they spent significantly more to make it. And as a result, it has to appeal to everyone. So you might have to get a lot of critics that like it. But with Gran Turismo, it just needs to be appealing to the small group that it actually appeals to. Now, when you make these small budget movies, like I say, when you have creative say so in the people like directing it and writing it, well then yeah, it's not going to have as much of a mass appeal. But like I was saying, it doesn't need to, and that's the problem when you get rid of these mid-budget movies and you have only those huge high budget ones, is that you need to make something that appeals to everyone all the time. And that's the result, is you get something that people might like but no one actually loves. But when you have these other ones like this, the studios have less of a risk involved with it, because even if it fails, it's not going to lose as much as, let's say, The Flash, which is going to lose like $300 million. I mean, the worst this will lose is about $120 million. Still not good, but that's literally if no one actually sees it. You spend like $50-60 million on a movie, and I mean, if you're going to get any wide release, chances are it's going to make that back, or at least it's going to find an audience, just so long as the people making it are competent directors. And you got Neil Blomkamp behind this, and he's actually has a good track record. So that's probably the way that they should be going. And with a lot of the problems with the studios happening now, and then the strikes also kind of causing a damage to them in somewhat, I mean, for the most part, it's helping them, but I think they're reevaluating what their game plan is going forward. And I think what we're going to see is a little bit kind of the resurgence of more of the mid-budget movies, or maybe the little bit lower budget ones. At least I would like to see that kind of do the whole Blumhouse model, where studios just pay a little bit of money to a director and let them to have creative control over their project and bring that passion into it. And maybe it'll be better movies for a result. I mean, yeah, me as a moviegoer, I won't necessarily like everything out there, but there'll probably be some more things out there that I absolutely love, as opposed to just whatever generic garbage that they've been churning out lately. But that's what I think, at least. Let me know what you think about all this in the comment section below. And if you like this video, make sure you click the like button, share the video, and subscribe to the channel if you want to stay up to date with the latest news. Thank you.